Hey y'all, how you doing today? Corey here. Just wanted to sit back and talk to you about a couple things with calling for predators specifically. What I have here is my Fox Pro X-Wave. It's my e-collar that I've been using lately. There's a lot of them on the market. There's Fox Pros, there's Lucky Duck, all offered at Foxhole Armament, so you can check out the site. I'm going to talk to you about how I use my e-collars and how they're efficient, as well as using a couple different diaphragm calls. So I have some MFK and some Linguist game calls that I've been using to help call in the more stubborn dogs. Let's start with the e-collar. So with my Fox Pro X-Wave, big reasons to have an e-collar: they're easy. Okay, you have pre-recorded sounds that are consistent. It's going to sound the same every time because you're pushing a button and that sound's coming through. Speaking of pushing a button, all you got to do is hit play and you sit back and you can start watching and monitoring for those coyotes coming in from different angles. If you're trying to run a camera while you're hunting so you can film your hunts, it's a lot easier when you have just a button to push. You can sit it down. A couple other cool features on those is you have different pre-recorded sounds that you can sequence, and you can get it set up in a sequence that you want for your favorite hunts. That being said, you can have it to where it's howling, rolling straight into your distress a couple minutes later. It's all timed out and automated. That's very nice. Downfalls to using an e-collar, in my personal opinion: something that's recorded and coming out of a speaker versus something that is still, although it's not coming out of a coyote's mouth, it is coming directly out of your mouth as you're playing it. Super beneficial to have that more realistic sound coming out. It's not coming off a plastic horn. Now, putting those together, I like to have my diaphragms to start out a set. I like to howl, and I prefer using all my vocals with diaphragms. And then the cool thing about my e-collar is I can throw on my distress call when it's starting to get hot in a set. The animals are getting ready to come rolling in pretty heavy. Another benefit of having my e-collar is you can pre-program. So on this Fox Pro, I can do my Fox Bang feature, and I can have a coyote pup distress set up to right when I shoot that gun at that first yote that's running in. All I got to do is have that sound close enough to this remote. It kicks on that automatic coyote pup distress, which is going to help me out. It's going to be a lot more efficient at keeping that one that may stand by just a little bit longer, give me a second shot, because there's no time. I didn't have to grab a diaphragm and throw it in my mouth and try to do that pup distress. As I said, with the diaphragm calls, they do, in my opinion, sound more realistic because it's actually coming out of your mouth and it's not something that's being recorded. It's just like listening to somebody play guitar in real life compared to having them record it and send it to you. It's always a little bit better in real time. So I'll give a couple demos right here real quick with what I like to do with my diaphragms, and then I'll explain some sequences of how I use my diaphragms in conjunction with my electric collars. I think a lot of hunting is preparation, so what I do is I get my stuff all staged out. I would have my e-collar already set out there, have the remote turned on, standing by with me, figure out which calls I want to use. So I'll go with the Linguist game call, howler, and one of the rabbit distress calls. Obviously the timing is going to be a little different because I'm talking you through this, but I'll explain how long I would wait before going into the next setup. So I give a nice long lone howl, maybe a bark or two before, nothing crazy, and I will let that resonate with the coyotes who are out there listening. I'm trying to tune their ear in. I'm trying to make them think that there's another coyote in the area. I want them to adjust what they were doing to focus on what I'm doing over here. Whether it is, are they interested in a light howl being a pup in the area, a female in the area? Depending on how aggressive the coyotes in the area you're hunting are, you can throw more of a male howl out there and see if you have a challenger or a big boy coming in there to fight with them. Either way, throwing out a howl that's saying, hey, I'm in the area. Is there anybody else in the area? What I'll do is I'll let that sit for 4 or 5 minutes. Every now and then, specifically when I'm doing my night sets, you'll hear a lot of coyotes start howling around you, kind of saying, hey, we're over here, come play with us, come be with us. I'll let it sit for 4 or 5 minutes, and then I will either give another howl if they're talking to me, see if I can get them to roll in with just vocals. The thing that a lot of people are doing nowadays is causing problems, is it's like, howl, nope, that didn't work. Okay, distress call, nope, that didn't work. Now bird distress, and they're rolling through so many different calls and educating the coyotes, because at some point it's super unrealistic to have a injured rabbit, an injured fawn, an injured bird, an injured coyote pup, and 25 different vocals all in the same area, especially when you're not moving. So give it some time. You got their ears tuned in. A lot of times after that first howl or two, I'll sit back and you'll have a curious coyote come wandering in. You get your shot. If I see one coming and hang up a little ways out, or if I know that they're in the area and I just got their ears tuned in, I'll roll into a distress. So a little linguist game called rabbit distress. I'll go through a couple different sounds, but I'm really doing a wah or a wee to try to get that distressed rabbit sound. So you can hear that wah and that wee as I go in, and I'm trying to get that most realistic rabbit sound for them to come in and play. Doesn't always work, but after those 3, 4, 5 minutes of my howls, I get into my rabbit distress. I'll do that a couple minutes. Obviously it's a little different when it's coming out of your lungs instead of just pushing a button and let the batteries play. I'll do it a couple minutes, catch my breath, couple minutes, catch my breath, and I'll do it for a total of about 4 or 5 minutes. I'll let it set. Let it set a minute or two, and in my mind, if I didn't already have a coyote coming in, and just realize when you're using a mouth call, they're gonna come in super hot and they're gonna come in straight at you because that's where the sound's coming from. So make sure that you are very cognizant of your movement and try to focus on exactly where you expect the dogs to come from, and be ready because they might come in hot. A lot of the times after those couple minutes of the distress call, my opinion and my thought process is I gave out a howl, a coyote heard in the area that there's another coyote. A couple minutes later, they think that that coyote caught an animal or grabbed an animal, injured an animal. They start running in towards you. That break in calling gets them super excited about getting close, but they don't really know where you're at, so they start zigzagging back and forth and they're looking for that rabbit. Give it a minute or two, and then just a couple more just to kind of tune them in and vector them in on your location. I'll wait anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes after doing a rabbit distress, and I'll sit there and I'll either end on a coyote pup distress, and I'll roll right into, something happened with that lone howl female or pup. I'll go into a coyote pup distress. And I'll finish my set like that, or I'll throw out another howler, so depending on how vocal they were with me when we started. The entire time that I'm using those diaphragms, you can mix in the e-collar as well, or you can do these sequences with just the e-collar. But what I'll typically do on my sets is I'll start with the diaphragm, give that lone howler 2. I'll give it a little bit of the rabbit distress on the diaphragm because, again, I do believe it sounds a little more realistic. If nothing else, I'll switch, maybe do a bird, something that I'm not as quality on the diaphragm as I can play. Switch to a bird. If I'm in an area where I know there's a lot of coyotes and I might have to be taking multiple shots, I'm going to switch to my e-collar. I've been in an area that's never called before, so I'm not worried about call-shy dogs fearing any kind of sound that they hear. I'm going to kick on my e-collar. I have my fox bang, so it's going to go right into that pup distress after I fire a shot. There's a big use for both of these, and at some point here I'll do a full overview and review of the Fox Pro X-Wave and maybe a couple others from Lucky Duck. But just to give you a little tidbit of how I am out there calling, what I'm doing on my sets, there's no perfect way to do it, but what I will say is when you're using an e-collar, don't turn it up too loud. Okay, that's a big cause to push people away. When you're using an e-collar, do not go through every sound in the book and wait for a coyote to come in. Have a plan of your set and stick to your plan. It's really easy to keep pushing that button thinking they might come in. Stick to what you want to do. Keep it low. Make sure that you have good spacing between your sounds, and then think through what you're trying to make that coyote believe. It's not just drop a rabbit call and expect them to come in. What do you think that coyote's thinking when he first hears that howl or first hears that distress, and what is going to entice him or trigger him to really come in and give you that opportunity for that kill?